Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In case you're wondering why our audience looks a little more distinguished than normal, we are graced by the Oklahoma Wheat Growers Association, all of whom know the nominee personally. I thank you for the chance to get on the record, as we all want to do, concerning this nominee. He's a personal friend of those of us in Oklahoma, and he's gone beyond being responsive to this committee. And I think it's important to get into the record, because we're making the record here, what he's actually been through. He went through 4 rounds of questions. That's more rounds than any other nominee in the recorded history of this committee. In addition, he's answered 206 of our questions during that time. However, that was just the beginning of it, because once the hearing was over, our friends on the other side of the dais submitted 1,078 questions for the record. Now, the chairman has talked about some of the previous nominees. In this case, during the Browner nomination, she had a total of 137 questions for the record. He had 1,078. During Christy Todd Whitman, she had 178 questions for the record. And when Lisa Jackson was here, she had only 133. So he had 1,078 questions for the record, including the extra questions from Senator Carper, asked Pruitt in his December 28th letter, as Pruitt promised he would. This means that he answered 1,000 more questions than any other administrator nominee in the past 3 presidential administrations. Last week, EPW, that's Environment Public Works, Democrats held a shadow hearing inviting partisan environmentalists to talk to each other, including a former employee of the Oklahoma Attorney General's office under Pruitt's predecessor, who was sued and settled out of court for extreme workplace harassment. Great witness. Yet, even with all of the unnecessary questions that the Democrat shadow hearing, Pruitt continued to talk with Ranking Member Carper by phone on Monday for 30 minutes, answering even more questions. I know about this phone call, and no new questions were asked, none. Ranking Member Carper asked the same recusal questions posed at the January 18th nomination hearing, even though he has a letter from the EPA Career Ethics employees stating Pruitt has satisfied all ethics requirements and has entered into the same recusal agreement as former Administrator Lisa Jackson. The other side just happens not to like the answer. Now, I'm going to ask the unanimous consent that we have a letter be added into the record after my remarks. Ranking Member Carper complained that Pruitt's description of the Illinois River Agreement was wrong. Pruitt has negotiated the first enforceable limit on phosphorus in the Illinois River. That's simply a fact. He complained about Pruitt's answers on whether EPA can control mercury from power plants, alleging Pruitt opposes it simply because he was on the winning side of the Michigan versus EPA legislation, where the Supreme Court found EPA didn't bother to consider the costs of EPA's own rules, contrary to law. Finally, he complained about the answers to only 9 questions out of 1,078 questions, where Pruitt had to refer to the process under Oklahoma's Open Records Act to get a comprehensive response to the questions. Here are some examples of the Democrat member questions, and you can decide whether or not referral to the Open Records Act was appropriate. Senator Cardin, in his 29th question, Senator Cardin, who is not here today, but a member of this committee, he said, and this is a quote, "Please provide all communications you have had with representatives of agricultural and other companies regarding water quality litigation between Arkansas and Oklahoma." Senator Carper's 119th question, "For each listed matter in the state of Oklahoma has been a litigation, he's a litigant or petitioner against the EPA, please provide any and all documents, including any and all written electronic correspondence, audio tapes, electronic records, videotapes, photographs, telephone messages, voicemails, emails, facsimiles, daily agendas and calendars, information about meetings and or discussions, whether in person or over the phone, agendas, minutes, and a list of participants for those meetings and or discussions, and transcripts and notes of any such meetings or discussions from the date on which your office first began to prepare the litigation at hand, to the date of the letter between you or other employees in your office and each representative of each non-governmental entity with whom you or your office communicated about the litigation. All of these, that's all in one question. They're all part of the 1,078 questions. Senator Marker's 61st question. For each year since 1995, that's 22 years of records, please provide information regarding the state of Oklahoma's environmental enforcement efforts, specifically descriptions of each environmental enforcement action, including investigations and enforcement proceedings initiated by the AG's, that's Attorney General's office, including the date of the action that was initiated, the name of the subject of the action, and the nature of the action and environmental violation that led thereto, the annual budget and the number of employees, and this is still Senator Markey's 61st question, describe of each environmental enforcement action, including investigations and enforcement procedures that was closed, including a description of the resolution of the matter, whether a fine or penalty was levied, and if so, the amount of such fine or penalty, whether monetary remedies were required, and if so, what, and whether criminal prosecution was initiated in the matter, and if so, what the resolution to the prosecution was. That's the end of that question. Senator Whitehouse's 84th and 85th question. Please list all matters you and your office has had with the U.S. Department of Interior or the EPA since you became Attorney General of Oklahoma. For the purpose of this and the following questions, matters refer to lawsuits, including lawsuits in which your office filed a friend of the court brief, enforcement actions, investigations, rulemakings, and any other matter which included an adjudication between parties. And let me repeat that Scott Pruitt has answered 1,000 more questions than any other nominee in the last 3 presidential administrations, and Scott Pruitt went through 4 rounds of questions, and that's more rounds of questions than anyone has had to be subjected to in the history of this committee. So it's time, I think, that we move on and get him voted out, and he's going to make a great administrator of the EPA and a refreshing change. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Inhofe, was there something you wanted to introduce to the record?